The Chronicon, an epic history of gods, titans, and men. Prologue, the whisper of void. Forget the smiling statues, the pastel robes, and the sanitized tales of Disney cartoons. The true history of the Greek gods, the mythos that shaped Western civilization, is a brutal, visceral, and profoundly human drama of ambition, jealousy, incest, and blood. It is a story not of perfection, but of endless, violent, generational trauma played out on a cosmic scale. This is the account as told by the ancient poets, the tragedians, and the fragmented voices of the Hellenic world. This is the Chronicon, a factual, chronological retelling of the most astounding family feud in history. A history that begins not with a god, but with a terrifying, absolute void. Part 1. Cosmogenesis and the Age of the Titans. The birth of order from chaos. In the beginning, there was only chaos, the great gulf, the terrifying, undifferentiated emptiness. This was not a god, but the very possibility of non-existence, the swirling abyss before anything took shape. From this primordial void emerged the first entities, not through any divine act, but by spontaneous generation, a fundamental shift from nothingness to somethingness. First came Gaia, Earth, the solid foundation, the fertile, boundless ground. Gaia was the eternal bedrock upon which all things would be built. With her came Tartarus, the deep abyss below the earth, a prison of shadows and unimaginable depth, the very antimatter to Gaia's substance. And finally, Eros, desire, not the winged cherub of later romance, but the elemental driving force of procreation, attraction, and motion. Gaia, the Great Mother, driven by the very nature of Eros, mated with herself to bring forth her equals. Uranus, sky, the starry firmament arching above her, and Pontus, sea, the unfruitful, restless waters. The original sin, the castration of Uranus. The first ruler of the cosmos was Uranus, the boundless sky. He was not a benevolent king, but a tyrant whose immense presence smothered his own creations. Uranus, united with Gaia, sired the first true dynasty, the Titans, the Cyclopses, and the Hecatonchires. The Titans were 12 in number, mighty and majestic, 6 male, including Oceanus, the river that encircles the world, Coeus, intelligence and questioning, Crius, the constellation, Hyperion, the sun, the heavenly light, Iapetus, mortality, the father of mankind's race, and their eventual terrible leader, Cronus, time, harvest, and destruction. The 6 female Titans were Tethys, Phoebe, Thea, Themis, Mnemosyne, and Rhea. But Uranus also sired creatures he considered monstrous, the 3 Cyclopses, Brontes, Steropes, and Argus, each with a massive single eye, masters of the forge and lightning, and the 3 Hecatonchires, giants of staggering size, each possessing 100 hands and 50 heads. Uranus was terrified of the power and grotesque nature of these offspring. To maintain his absolute dominance and prevent any challenge, he brutally forced the Cyclopses and the Hecatonchires back into the womb of Gaia, imprisoning them deep within the earth. Gaia, stretched and suffocating, cried out in agony. She appealed to her Titan children to rise up against their tyrannical father. All hesitated, fearing Uranus's might. All except the youngest, Cronus, whose name meant the crushing force of time itself. Gaia forged a mighty adamantine sickle, a curved, crescent-shaped blade. Cronus accepted the weapon and lay in wait. When Uranus descended upon Gaia in his nightly embrace, Cronus, in a single monstrous act, castrated his father. The scream of Uranus split the cosmos. His blood spilled upon the earth, birthing the three Erenges, Furies, spirits of vengeance, the giants, Gigantes, immense warlike beings, and the Meleii, ash-tree nymphs. The severed member of Uranus was thrown into the sea. From the churning heavenly foam, a deity of immense beauty and destructive power arose, Aphrodite, the goddess of love, beauty, and sexual desire. The reign of Cronus. With Uranus defeated and banished to the uttermost limits of the cosmos, the Titans were freed, and Cronus ascended to the throne of the universe. He ruled with his sister wife, Rhea, during the so-called Golden Age, a time of peace and prosperity for the earth, but a time of gnawing paranoia for its ruler. Cronus knew the ancient prophecy. Just as he had usurped his father, so would one of his own children depose him. This fear consumed him. To prevent the prophecy's fulfillment, Cronus committed a horrifying act of cosmic infanticide. As Rhea gave birth to her children, the future Olympian gods, Cronus would immediately swallow them whole, sealing them inside his immortal stomach, a dark internal prison of flesh and fear. He devoured Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. Rhea, the mother of the gods, was heartbroken. When she became pregnant with her sixth child, she sought counsel from Gaia and Uranus. They helped her devise a masterful deception. Rhea traveled to the island of Crete and, in the deep cavern of Dictae, gave birth in secret to her youngest son, Zeus. She then returned to Cronus and presented him with a stone, swaddled in a blanket. Cronus, suspecting nothing in his panicked hunger, swallowed the stone immediately. Zeus was raised in secret on Crete. Nurtured by the nymph Amalthea, sometimes a goat, sometimes a woman who owned a goat, and protected by the Curetes, warriors whose loud clashing of spears and shields drowned out the sound of the baby god's cries, Zeus grew quickly to godhood. His upbringing was a masterclass in clandestine preparation for war. The Titanomachy. When he reached full strength, Zeus prepared his revolution. He returned to his mother, Rhea, who gave him a powerful emetic potion. Disguised as Cronus's cupbearer, Zeus served the drink. The potion caused Cronus to violently vomit up his swallowed children. First came the stone, then, in reverse order of consumption, the 5 fully grown immortal siblings, Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, and Poseidon. They emerged not as infants, but as powerful gods ready for war against the tyrant who had imprisoned them since their birth. This was the beginning of the Titanomachy, the 10-year war between the younger Olympian gods and the elder Titans. Zeus and his siblings established their base atop Mount Olympus. They secured crucial alliances. Hecatonchires and Cyclopses. Zeus descended into Tartarus and freed his imprisoned monstrous uncles, the Cyclopses and the Hecatonchires. In gratitude, the Cyclopses forged their famed weapons. For Zeus, the mighty thunderbolts, weapons of pure celestial fire. For Poseidon, the earth-shaking trident. For Hades, the helmet of darkness, which rendered its wearer invisible. Prometheus and Epimetheus. The Titan Iapetus's sons, Prometheus, forethought, and Epimetheus, afterthought, sensing Cronus's inevitable defeat, defected and joined Zeus's side. The Titans, led by Cronus, fought from their stronghold on Mount Othrys.
The war was long, brutal, and destructive, shaking the very foundations of the cosmos. Mountains were hurled, the sky was scorched, and the sea boiled. It was a stalemate of immense power. The tide finally turned when Zeus unleashed his full arsenal, throwing barrage after barrage of his newly forged thunderbolts. The Hecatonchires with their 100 hands rained down mountains and boulders upon the Titans. The Olympians won. The reign of the Titans was over. The division of the cosmos and the rise of Olympus. Zeus and his brothers imprisoned the defeated Titans, with the exception of Oceanus, who remained.
Following the victory, the three brothers drew lots to divide the rule of the cosmos. Zeus won the lot for the sky and the supreme rule over all gods and mortals, becoming the king of Olympus. Poseidon won the lot for the sea and all its depths. Hades received the lot for the unseen realm, the underworld, the domain of the dead. The earth, Gaia, remained common ground for all. Thus, the dynasty of the Olympians, the third and final dynasty, was established on the snow-capped peak of Mount Olympus. The great Olympian pantheon was formed. Zeus, king of the gods, ruler of the sky, god of law, order, and justice, his symbol, the thunderbolt and the eagle. Hera, queen of the gods, Zeus's sister and wife, goddess of marriage, women, and childbirth, forever consumed by jealousy over her husband's infidelity. Poseidon, god of the sea, earthquakes, and horses, capable of calming or destroying the waves with a flick of his trident. Hades, god of the underworld, and riches, minerals within the earth, a somber and aloof deity who rarely left his subterranean realm. Hestia, goddess of the hearth and home, the gentlest of the Olympians, who would eventually yield her throne to Dionysus to maintain cosmic peace. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, agriculture, and the fertility of the earth, whose grief would one day hold the world hostage. The next generation of the Olympians, the third and final generation of Olympians, would soon join them, solidifying their power and setting the stage for the age of gods and mortals. The cosmos was now ordered, but peace was far from secured. Zeus had Part 2. The Consolidation of Olympus and the Age of Mortals. The Last Threat, the Gigantomachy and Typholius. The Titanomachy was a decisive victory, but it did not bring lasting peace. Gaia, the earth itself, was still grieving the imprisonment of her sons, the Titans, whom Zeus had hurled into Tartarus. Her rage festered, and she resolved to produce new, even more terrifying opponents to challenge the upstart Olympians. First came the Gigantes, giants, immense, powerful, and ferocious beings born from the blood of the mutilated Uranus. The ensuing war was the Gigantomachy. The giants were nearly invulnerable, with a key caveat. They could only be killed by a combination of a god and a mortal acting together. This prophesied weakness forced the gods to descend and seek aid from the mortal world. The key to victory lay in the hero Heracles, who, though not yet born at this time, would embody the necessary divine and mortal strength. The giants hurled mountains, and the Olympians met them with full force. Athena famously threw the island of Sicily onto the giant Enceladus, trapping him. In a pivotal moment, Zeus stunned the giants with his thunderbolts, and the mortal hero Heracles delivered the killing blow, fulfilling the prophecy. But Gaia's fury was not yet spent. Her final, most formidable creation was Typholius, a monster that defied imagination. He was a colossal entity,
so huge that his head scraped the stars, his body covered in snakes, his voice a cacophony of animal roars, and his breath a scorching wind. The sight of Typhoeus terrified even the Olympian gods. They fled Olympus, transforming into animals to hide in Egypt. Zeus became a ram, Hera a cow, Apollo a hawk, and so on. Only Athena stood her ground, shaming her father Zeus into returning. Zeus faced Typhoeus in a cataclysmic battle. The monster managed to wound Zeus, stealing the sinews from his hands and feet, rendering the king of the gods helpless. Typhoeus imprisoned Zeus in a cave. It took the cunning of Hermes and the goat god Pan to retrieve the sinews and restore Zeus's power. The final confrontation took place beneath Mount Etna. Zeus barraged Typhoeus with a continuous storm of thunderbolts until the immense monster was defeated and crushed beneath the volcano, where his restless breathing is still felt as volcanic eruptions. The defeat of the Gigantes and Typhoeus marked the definitive end of the cosmic wars. Zeus's authority was now absolute, secured by both military might and prophetic destiny. The Olympians had taken their rightful place as the supreme rulers, turning their attention from fighting cosmic entities to governing the world, which now included a new, fragile race, mortals. The shaping of man, Prometheus and Epimetheus. With the wars settled, the great task remained, populating the earth. In many Greek traditions, mankind was created by the Titan Prometheus, who had sided with the Olympians. Prometheus and his brother, Epimetheus, afterthought, were tasked with creating the living creatures of the world and gifting them with the necessary skills for survival. Epimetheus, in his haste and lack of foresight, quickly distributed all the best gifts, claws, fur, shells, speed, and wings, to the animals. When it came time to create man, Epimetheus realized he had nothing left. Prometheus stepped in. He did not give man animalistic gifts, but rather shaped him upright, in the image of the gods, and gifted him with intellect and a superior mind. The early relationship between gods and men was mediated by Prometheus, but a fundamental conflict soon arose over the question of worship and sacrifice. At a great feast held at Mycone, Prometheus sought to trick Zeus and improve man's lot. He butchered an ox and divided it into two piles. A large pile of bones, cleverly concealed beneath a layer of glittering, appealing fat, and a small pile of nourishing meat hidden beneath the unappetizing tripe. He asked Zeus to choose which portion would be reserved for the gods in all future sacrifices. Zeus, seeing through the trick, but choosing to accept the challenge, deliberately chose the pile of bones and fat. This established the custom. Men would burn the inedible fat and bones for the gods, keeping the nourishing meat for themselves. Zeus was furious, not because of the meat, but because Prometheus had successfully circumvented the gods' authority. He swore revenge not just on Prometheus, but on the favored race of man. The divine retribution, fire, and Pandora. Zeus's first act of retaliation was to withhold fire from mankind, plunging them into cold and darkness, crippling their technological and social development. Prometheus, seeing man suffering, performed his most famous, defiant act. He ascended to Mount Olympus, stole a spark of fire from the sun chariot of Helios, or in other accounts from the forge of Hephaestus, and brought it down to earth, hidden within a fennel stalk. The gift of fire elevated man from a mere animal to a civilization builder. Zeus's response was swift and terrible, a two-part punishment that explains the origin of pain, toil, and trouble in the mortal world. First, the punishment of Prometheus. Zeus had Prometheus chained to a massive pillar high in the Caucasus Mountains. Every day, an eagle, the sacred animal of Zeus, would descend and devour Prometheus's immortal liver, which would regenerate each night. This cycle of torture was meant to last for eternity, an agonizing spectacle of divine power.
Second, the punishment of man, Pandora. To punish the mortal race, Zeus ordered the creation of a beautiful, irresistible evil. Hephaestus, the smith god, crafted the first woman out of earth and water, endowing her with staggering beauty. Aphrodite gave her grace, Hermes gave her cunning and the ability to lie, and Athena clothed her. They named her Pandora, all gifted. Hermes presented Pandora to Epimetheus, the brother of Prometheus. Prometheus had warned his brother never to accept a gift from Zeus, but Epimetheus, in his trademark afterthought, was so captivated by Pandora's beauty that he accepted her as his wife. Pandora carried with her a single sealed jar, not a box, as the later Latin translation popularized. She was strictly forbidden to open it. Driven by the manipulative curiosity gifted to her by the gods, Pandora lifted the lid. Out of the jar swarmed every imaginable form of suffering: sickness, toil, vengeance, plagues, old age, death, and all the sorrows of the world. They scattered across the earth, afflicting mankind. Terrified, Pandora quickly slammed the lid shut. Only one entity remained trapped inside: Olympus, hope. Thus the Greeks explained the human condition. Man gained fire, the source of civilization, but in exchange received both woman, the source of procreation, and the boundless suffering that makes life tragic, a suffering only made bearable by the persistent presence of hope, trapped yet lingering. The Olympian dynasty expands. With the cosmic battles over and humanity introduced, the gods settled into their divine roles, cementing the eternal drama of Olympus. The marriage between Zeus and Hera, though official, was perpetually strained. Hera, the majestic patron of marriage, was intensely jealous, not without cause, as Zeus was notoriously promiscuous. His lustful pursuit of nymphs, goddesses, and mortal women would generate the next generation of powerful Olympians and the countless heroes who would shape the mortal world. The second generation of Olympians, born from Zeus's affairs and his marriage to Hera, included Ares, god of war, born of Zeus and Hera, embodying the brutal, destructive, and bloody aspects of battle. Hephaestus, god of the forge, fire, and craftsmanship, also Hera's son, though some say she birthed him alone out of spite. Born lame and ugly, he was once cast from Olympus by his mother and would become the world's greatest artisan. He was often married to Aphrodite, an ironic pairing of the lame craftsman and the goddess of perfection. Athena, goddess of wisdom, strategic war, and handicraft, arguably Zeus's favorite. She was born fully formed and armored from Zeus's head after he swallowed the pregnant titaness Metis to prevent a prophecy that their son would overthrow him. Apollo, god of the sun, music, prophecy, the oracle at Delphi, and healing, and his twin sister, Artemis, goddess of the hunt, the moon, and wild animals. They were born to the titaness Leto, a birth that caused Hera's wrath to chase Leto across the world until she found refuge on the floating island of Delos. Hermes, god of travel, thieves, merchants, and the messenger of the gods, born to the nymph Maia. He was a mischievous, cunning infant who invented the lyre and stole Apollo's cattle on his very first day of life. Dionysus, god of wine, ecstasy, ritual madness, and theater, born to the mortal princess Semele. He was the only major god to have a mortal mother, embodying the intoxicating, blurred line between the human and the divine. These 12 Olympians, alongside Hades, Poseidon, Hestia, and Demeter, now held the reins of fate. Their personal, often petty squabbles, and their interactions with their new playthings, mankind, would form the basis of the heroic age. The stage was set for the tragic cycles of great royal houses, epic quests, and the inevitable downfall of hubristic men.
Part 3. The Early Ages and the Seeds of Heroism. The Olympians had won the cosmos, but their rule was not defined by harmony. It was defined by Zeus's insatiable lust and Hera's relentless vengeance. This volatile divine marriage became the primary catalyst for the early myths and the creation of the foundational royal families of Greece. The lines of kings and heroes were often born in scandal, tragedy, and the brutal consequences of divine interference. Hera's fury and the foundation of Argos. One of Zeus's earliest and most tragic affairs involved Io, a beautiful mortal princess of Argos, or, in some accounts, a priestess of Hera herself. Zeus became infatuated with Io, and to conceal their trysts from his ever-watchful wife, he enveloped the world in a thick, dark cloud. Hera immediately suspected the deception. She descended, scattering the cloud, only to find Zeus standing next to a beautiful snow-white heifer. Zeus, in a panic, had transformed Io into an animal. Hera, feigning admiration, demanded the heifer as a gift. Zeus could not refuse without revealing his guilt. Hera accepted the cow, and then, to ensure Zeus could not secretly change her back, she appointed Argus Panoptus, a giant with 100 eyes, some always awake, to guard the hapless Io. Io was forced to wander the earth under the perpetual staring gaze of Argus. Zeus, taking pity on his mistress, ordered Hermes to rescue her. Hermes, the master of cunning, approached Argus, lulling all 100 eyes to sleep with monotonous stories and the soft music of his pipe. Once Argus slept, Hermes cut off his head. Hera was enraged. She collected Argus's eyes and set them into the tail of her sacred bird, the peacock, a permanent symbol of her watchful vengeance. She then sent a vicious gadfly to pursue Io. The tiny insect stung and tormented Io across the entire known world, driving her mad with pain and fear. Io, in her torment, wandered across Europe and Asia, her journey marking geographical boundaries, the Ionian Sea, named for her crossing, and the Bosporus, meaning ox ford, the crossing of the cow. She finally reached Egypt, where Zeus restored her human form. Io gave birth to their son, Epaphus, who would become the ancestor of some of Greece's greatest heroic lines, including that of Heracles. The foundation of the great city of Argos, the city of many heroes, was thus built on an act of divine deceit and excruciating mortal suffering. The foundation of Thebes and the dragon's teeth. The city of Thebes, a perpetual rival to Athens and Argos, was founded through another dramatic divine interaction. The founder was Cadmus, a Phoenician prince who sent out by his father, King Agenor, to find his sister, Europa. Europa was another mortal woman Zeus desired. He transformed himself into a magnificent gentle white bull and seduced her while she was gathering flowers on a beach. Europa climbed onto his back, and the bull swam across the Mediterranean to Crete, where he revealed his true form. Europa became the ancestor of the Cretan royalty, and the continent of Europe took her name. Cadmus searched for Europa in vain. The oracle at Delphi instructed him to give up his quest and instead follow a sacred cow he would encounter. Where the cow lay down, he was to found a new city. The cow led Cadmus to a site in Boeotia, where he prepared to make a sacrifice. He sent his men to a nearby spring, which was guarded by a ferocious serpentine water dragon, a child of Ares. The dragon slaughtered Cadmus's men. Cadmus faced the monster alone and killed it. Athena then appeared, instructing him to pull out the dragon's teeth and sow them into the earth. From the soil immediately sprang a host of fierce, fully armed warrior men, known as the Spartoi,
sown men. These warriors immediately began fighting each other until only 5 survived. These 5 became the first noble families and citizens of the new city, which Cadmus named Thebes. To appease Ares for killing his child, Cadmus was forced to serve the god for a great year, and eventually married Ares's daughter, Harmonia. The marriage of a mortal man to the divine daughter of war and love, Aphrodite was Harmonia's mother, a common mythological pairing, was meant to stabilize the volatile beginnings of the city, but it instead ensured that Thebes would be cursed with an endless cycle of divine conflict and mortal tragedy.
The Minoan dynasty and the Minotaur. The island of Crete was home to another early powerful dynasty, the Minoans. This line descended directly from Zeus and Europa. Their son was Minos, a king whose name became synonymous with the island. Minos claimed his divine right to rule based on a direct sign from the gods. To prove it, he prayed to Poseidon to send a magnificent bull from the sea, promising to sacrifice it immediately. Poseidon obliged, sending a bull of blinding white beauty. The bull was so splendid that Minos, succumbing to greed and hubris, decided to keep it, sacrificing a lesser bull in its place. Poseidon was not fooled. The god inflicted a terrible, twisted revenge, striking Minos' wife, Pasiphae, with an unnatural, irresistible lust for the beautiful white bull. Pasiphae, driven mad, begged the great inventor Daedalus to construct a wooden cow in which she could hide to successfully mate with the bull. From this monstrous union, Pasiphae gave birth to the Minotaur, a creature with the body of a man and the head of a bull. Ashamed and desperate to hide his wife's terrible offspring and his own guilt, Minos ordered Daedalus to construct an impenetrable prison to contain the monster, the labyrinth, a complex maze of passages from which none could escape. The Minotaur demanded a tribute. When Minos conquered Athens after its prince Androgeus was killed there, he instituted a terrible annual tribute. 7 young men and 7 young maidens from Athens were sent to Crete to be sacrificed to the Minotaur in the labyrinth. This dark cycle of retribution, born from a god's anger and a king's arrogance, created the stage for the next great line of heroes, men who would be tasked not with founding cities, but with cleansing the world of the lingering ancient monstrosities. Part 4. The heroic age commences. The time of the gods fighting giants was over. Now came the era of the demigods, the offspring of divine fathers and mortal mothers, who possessed the strength to combat the monsters created in the old chaotic ages. Their purpose was to civilize the wilderness and clear the path for human civilization. Perseus and the Gorgon. The story of Perseus is one of destiny thwarted and fulfilled, beginning with a fear of prophecy. Acrisius, king of Argos, descendant of Io, was told by an oracle that he would be killed by his own grandson. To prevent this, he locked his only daughter, Danae, away in a bronze tower. Yet destiny cannot be barred. Zeus, captivated by Danae's beauty, bypassed the walls, not by force, but by essence, descending upon her in the form of a shower of golden rain. Danae became pregnant and birthed Perseus. Acrisius, terrified to kill his own blood, instead sealed Danae and the infant Perseus in a wooden chest and cast it into the sea. They were saved by a fisherman on the island of Seriphus. Years later, the wicked king Polydectes desired Danae and sought to get rid of Perseus. Polydectes tricked the young man into promising to bring him the most impossible and deadly gift, the head of Medusa.
Medusa was one of the three Gorgons, monstrous sisters whose gaze could instantly turn any living thing to stone. Perseus's quest was a suicide mission, but he had the favor of the gods, specifically Athena and Hermes. Hermes gave him an adamantine sword capable of cutting the Gorgon scales. Athena gave him a highly polished shield, which acted as a mirror, allowing him to see Medusa without looking directly at her. He sought out the Graiae, three ancient sisters who shared one eye and one tooth. By stealing their eye, Perseus forced them to reveal the location of the nymphs, who supplied him with the final tools, the winged sandals for speed, the cap of darkness, which granted invisibility, and a special pouch to carry the head. Using the mirrored shield, Perseus located Medusa, who was sleeping. In a single, swift strike with Hermes' sword, he decapitated the Gorgon. From Medusa's neck, the last vestiges of her divine origin, sprang the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor. Perseus, invisible with the cap of darkness and soaring on the winged sandals, escaped the wrath of the other Gorgons. His journey home took him to Ethiopia, where he found the princess Andromeda chained naked to a sea cliff, offered as a sacrifice to the monstrous sea serpent Cetus. Her mother, Cassiopeia, had boasted she was more beautiful than the Nereids, sea nymphs, and the sacrifice was Poseidon's punishment for this mortal hubris, or arrogant pride. Perseus slew the monster and freed Andromeda, claiming her as his bride. The myth culminates in the oracle's prophecy. Perseus, now a triumphant hero, returned to Greece, where his grandfather, King Acrisius, fled in terror. Years later, Perseus participated in an athletic competition. While throwing a discus, a strong gust of wind diverted the bronze plate, and it struck an old man watching from the crowd, instantly killing him. That man was King Acrisius. Perseus did not commit murder, but destiny was fulfilled. The great hero, the slayer of monsters and savior of princesses, was also the unwitting killer of his own grandfather. The cycles of divine fate and mortal tragedy had been established.
Part 5. The Greatest Hero, Heracles and the Price of Immortality. The most celebrated and enduring figure of the heroic age was Heracles, known to the Romans as Hercules, whose very existence was a constant reminder of Zeus's infidelity and Hera's unyielding resentment. His story is one of raw power, divine punishment, and the ultimately successful struggle for immortality. The birth and divine hatred. Heracles was the son of Zeus and the mortal woman Alcime. Knowing the child was destined for greatness, Zeus famously extended the night of the conception, declaring that the next descendant of Perseus born would rule a great kingdom. Hera, alerted to the prophecy, intervened. She rushed to prevent Heracles' birth, and failing that, accelerated the birth of Heracles' cousin, Eurystheus, making him the prophesied ruler of Mycenae and Tiryns. Hera's hatred began in Heracles' crib. She sent 2 venomous snakes to kill the infant. The baby Heracles, displaying his inherent divine strength, strangled the snakes with his bare hands, a feat that announced his destiny. Even after he was grown, Hera continued to persecute him. She struck Heracles with a fit of madness, mania, during which he tragically murdered his own wife, Megara, and his children. The Atonement, the 12 labors. Overcome with guilt and horror, Heracles went to the oracle at Delphi to seek penance. Hera influenced the oracle, which commanded Heracles to perform 12 labors for his cousin, King Eurystheus,
the very man who was his lesser. If he completed the tasks, he would be purified and granted immortality. The labors were designed by Hera and Eurystheus to be deadly and humiliating, split into two groups, the initial 6 tasks centered in the Peloponnese, and the later 6 requiring travel to the far ends of the world, often touching the realm of the dead. The Peloponnesian labors, monsters and beasts. Slaying the Nemean lion, a monstrous lion with an impenetrable hide. Heracles realized weapons were useless and was forced to wrestle and strangle the beast with his bare hands, a feat that announced his destiny. He thereafter wore his impervious pelt as his armor. Slaying the Lernaean Hydra, a 9-headed serpent. When one head was severed, 2 grew back in its place. With the help of his nephew, Iolaus, who cauterized the stumps with a firebrand as Heracles cut them, they defeated the monster. Heracles dipped his arrows in the Hydra's venomous blood, making them instantly lethal. Eurystheus disqualified this labor because Heracles received aid. Capturing the Cyrenean hind, a beautiful stag with golden antlers, sacred to Artemis. Heracles was not allowed to harm it. He hunted the agile deer for a full year before finally capturing it unharmed. Capturing the Erymanthian boar, a massive, ferocious boar. Heracles cornered it in deep snow and captured it alive, famously bringing it back to Eurystheus, who, terrified, hid in a large bronze storage jar. Cleaning the Augean stables. King Augeas owned thousands of cattle, and his stables had never been cleaned. Eurystheus gave Heracles 1 day for the task. Heracles, using brain over brawn, diverted the nearby Alpheus and Peneus rivers to rush through the stables and flush out the centuries of accumulated waste. Eurystheus disqualified this labor because Heracles had accepted payment from Augeas. Slaying the Stymphalian birds, man-eating birds with bronze beaks and metallic, arrow-like feathers that infested a forest. Athena provided Heracles with a bronze rattle, crotala, which he used to startle the birds into flight, allowing him to shoot them down with his poisoned arrows. The far-ranging labors, quests to the world's edge. Capturing the Cretan bull, the magnificent bull sent by Poseidon to King Minos, father of the Minotaur, which was born of this bull. Heracles wrestled it into submission, sailed it back to Greece, and presented it to a terrified Eurystheus. Obtaining the mares of Diomedes, man-eating horses belonging to the Thracian king Diomedes. Heracles defeated the king and fed Diomedes to his own carnivorous mares, which tamed them instantly. Obtaining the girdle of Hippolyta, the magical war belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. The queen, impressed by the hero, willingly offered the belt, but Hera stirred up trouble among the Amazons, resulting in a battle that Heracles was forced to win by killing Hippolyta. Obtaining the cattle of Geryon, a monster with 3 heads and 3 bodies, who lived on a remote island in the far west. To reach the island, Heracles traveled to the Strait of Gibraltar and split a mountain range to create the 2 great cliffs known as the Pillars of Heracles, the traditional boundary of the known world. After defeating Geryon, he undertook a grueling journey back, herding the cattle across Europe. Stealing the apples of the Hesperides. These golden apples, which granted immortality, belonged to Hera and were guarded by the daughters of Night, the Hesperides, and the 100-headed dragon Ladon. On the advice of Prometheus, Heracles sought out the Titan Atlas, who held the sky on his shoulders. Heracles tricked Atlas into fetching the apples, while the hero held the heavens. He then tricked Atlas again, taking the apples and running, before the Titan could refuse to take the burden back. Capturing Cerberus, the final, most fearsome task, bringing the three-headed dog, the guardian of the underworld, to the surface. Heracles had to descend into Hades itself. He successfully wrestled the beast without using weapons as required by Hades and brought the monstrous hound, dripping venom, to Eurystheus. Eurystheus was so terrified he immediately ordered Heracles to return the dog to the underworld. Apotheosis and legacy. The completion of the 12 labors marked Heracles' purification and effectively made him the greatest hero the world had ever known, a civilizer who rid the earth of ancient chaotic monsters. Though he suffered further tragedies, including his death by the poisoned cloak of the centaur Nexus, Zeus finally intervened. Heracles' mortal body was burned on a great pyre, but the divine part of him ascended to Mount Olympus, where he was finally reconciled with Hera and granted true immortality. He became a god of strength and heroes, married the goddess of youth, Hebe, and took his place among the Olympians, the only mortal hero to achieve this honor. Heracles' labors set the standard for heroism, clearing the path of monsters and lawlessness, allowing the next generation of heroes to focus on human and political achievements.